You know, you often ask if it's not broken, why try and fix it? That's the way I look at this. But now we hear the new Champions League format for next season is indeed going to become a reality. It will even have tennis-style seeding for the knockout stage, with the top two teams kept apart until the final. Lots of information filtering out overnight from UEFA about this. It is all change, but how much of a change are we going to see? Danny's clueless in this. Simon's not far behind him. So that's why we've roped in European football expert Andy Brassell to bring us right up to date. Andy, tell us what you know, my friend, and why is this such a good idea?
Oh, I don't know about the second part of it, but we'll get to the first part of it.
Right.
Obviously, we know that the Champions League is against all modern sports science being expanded to 36 teams. So what that means in layman's terms is because we're having one big league format and it's going to be one big group, most of the top of the Premier League teams are going to be playing 8 games rather than 6 games between now and Christmas, which I think is a huge difference when we get to the autumn of 2024. So we already knew that. We already knew that the top 8 go through automatically, that 9 to 24 go into a playoff round, similar to what we get with the Europa League at the moment. So then we end up with our last 16 from there. So, you know, there is something worthwhile in finishing in that top 8. I think because there's such a huge swell of teams, because it's bigger and there's such a huge swell of teams who are going through to this playoff round, you do wonder if there'll be a few dead rubbers. What we do know, as you hinted at, Jim, is, as was coming out overnight, that the draw is going to be too complicated, too complex to do in front of us. Now, of course, we were told that it could take, or various sources have told us that it could take 3 to 4 hours if we to do it manually. So presumably about a quarter of an hour longer than it actually takes at the moment, with all the build up and all the rest of it. So there's going to be some computer element to the draw, which I don't think in itself is particularly a bad thing, unless you enjoy the spectacle, I suppose, of the draw in the first place.
I mean, what I take out of this is that the knockout stages, Andy, are going to be seeded, which makes knockout something of a misnomer, does it not?
Not really, because that's what you have already, isn't it? Because if you look, there is an advantage, and that advantage is particularly clear in this year's Champions League draw to finishing first rather than second in the group. Now, whereas there's that tangible reward for that in the Europa League, in that you get to play 2 games less and you get to put your feet up for a couple more weeks, that is just the strength of the draw you get. Now, obviously, that varies year to year. Some years there's not a massive difference between being first and second place in a Champions League group. I think when you look at the ties in this last 16, there really is an advantage, or there really was an advantage to finishing first in that group this year, which is seeding of sorts. So I just think really it's in the way it's worded rather than the reality of it.
Yeah, but that if Man City and Real Madrid, let's say, were 1 and 2, irrelevant of what happens in the group, what the new format's going to do is when it gets to those two can't meet till the final. That's wrong. That is just wrong.
Is it though? I think because there's 2 ways of looking at it, really, Danny, because a lot of people have moaned about this Champions League last 16. Whereas if you get monster ties in it, you don't get them later in the competition. So I guess this is, you could say, for want of a better word, consumer-led rather than necessarily
I'm just an old school traditionalist who likes
broadcaster-led.
Yeah, it's broadcaster-led.
Yeah, it's not consumer-led, it's broadcaster-led.
I don't like it. I don't like it.
Andy, we also know UEFA also considered a proposal where the best performing clubs in the first round could pick their first knockout opponents in a live television event. Surprise, surprise. Apparently that idea didn't gather any support. I mean, what are they up to?
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference between stuff that's spitballed in a room and stuff that actually
exactly.
comes out and how it's going to be done. You know, unfortunately, we've got a lot of journalists out there who really get all the detail behind the discussions, and that was definitely one of those. But I think it does underline what a difficult position UEFA is in, particularly in this post A22 environment. A22 are of course tasked with putting together this Super League concept that Real Madrid and Barcelona, for example, have still stuck with. In that, what they've got to do is UEFA have got to have a really competitive tournament that at the same time scratches most of the major clubs' itches. Now, what you have in terms of UEFA is you do have advantages, even if you had this recent court case saying that UEFA don't have the right to a monopoly on it. Okay, fine. But what you do have with the current format and major clubs wanting to be part of it, there's no financial impetus for Premier League clubs to go because they already have all the money they could want from the domestic TV deal.
Yeah.
In the post-COVID period, you have PSG really cozying up to UEFA, so they don't want to go and do something different. And then you have the German clubs, Bayern Munich and Borussia Dortmund, who aren't going anywhere because their fans wouldn't accept being part of a Super League. So that really helps UEFA out. But what they've got to do is try and make it as advantageous financially as well as sporting wise, because I think we can talk about, Danny can talk about, and I agree with him, the sports element of it. What's the most compelling sport? I don't think that's always, well, it's not always the priority for the clubs at the moment, is it? No. It's about how they can get bums on seats, how they can get as much money from it as humanly possible.
Okay, Andy, these changes are coming. Thank you very much indeed. Andy Brassell, talkSPORT European football expert. Andy, thank you for that.
On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.